Okay, so welcome to this week's CERC HQ. It's going to be pretty much myself just kind of going over with Leon here, essentially like overall progress that we've had this week for development of the game. We have a lot to go through, so we're going to try and rapid fire this as much as possible, so that way it doesn't kind of bleed over longer. Leon, did you want to start first or did later in your area? What you've been doing on balance?
Sure. Well, I have been busy the past weeks, not only getting used to the new job, but also been busy balancing stuff. First of all, I nerfed the militia, then I also gave buff to various CERC, like the Black Hawk or the Sparrow. They had mistakes in the damage tables, I fixed those. I increased the range for the Bradley and the Abrams. I also asked Dimitri to add a new toy. It is the Springbok toe. The Juggernaut got fixed by Dark, and now it is not anymore wiping out squads of units. I also adjusted the damage from the car towards Zerg. Besides that, I decreased the falloff damage from call-ins after the bug that got fixed applied to everything, so a few falloffs are still messed up, probably, that I haven't looked at yet. Besides that, there was a buff for the mortar and the MLRS. Then the cannon turret got a buff to have a increased range. Not only did CERC get a buff on range, also the spine turret got a increase of range due to the changes I made for the CERC units, so that the spine turret is still effective against our tanks and our Bradleys, but also have a fair chance from CERC towards it. Chelsea got a buff in recent upload and update. Then I made the landscaping cheaper, and I believe that's pretty much it.
Okay, groovy. Yeah, I'm showing off the toe right now. This has kind of been shadow patched in for the last. I think it's been there for like a week, probably. Would you say? We didn't really
A
talk
week,
about it that
probably
much.
two.
Yeah, and because the Springbok was always seen as basically the upgrade over the Hummer and the Tier 2 as a bridge before you get to the Cerberus. I think you made it a little bit more resilient than the Ajax, right? Overall.
It should take 2 to 3 more hits than the regular Humvee.
Groovy. Cool. So let me see. For my thing, for the balance is like you figure he's been kind of like watching Steam, watching reviews, watching what people are saying on Discord. So again, there's a master thread on Discord, there's a master thread on Steam. So if you want to bring things up in terms of the overall balance of the concerns that you have, those are the best places to drop them. Whenever he gets a chance or I get a chance, if we will basically jump into threads and talk to people. And like you mentioned earlier, there was a thread that I was tracking with him and a couple other cats on Steam here. Let me see if I can find it. That was where is it? Basically, this right here for the Juggernaut's range, and at the same time nerfing the Juggernaut as a whole in terms of their damage fall off. So just to give a little bit of nuance there from what he was saying, there was a bug that was discovered that damage fall off was not scaling correctly from the inner to the outer circle. So whenever the Juggernaut threw his car, there was a very good chance that you were going to get applied full damage instead of a like water spread or like a trickle effect, a ripple would be the idea, is that you figure like you get the most damage in the center of the epicenter, you get the explosive AoE that you would get off of the car exploding, but then the like actual ripple explosion was like it was just not calculating correctly. So that was something that him and I kind of put some time aside this week to finally rectify that. A trickle down effect is something that we're basically still looking into and fixing. I think it was Riff and a couple other people that brought it to our attention. Is overall just the efficiency of other like weapons. We're looking at like the Abrams. We're looking at like the TOW. We're looking at different elements where there's an explosive like backblast or an actual like you get the impact. The impact does damage, sure, but then you have the secondary effect, which is like the AOE explosion, and those are separated from each other in terms of how we do the balancing of the damage. And one of the issues that he's kind of rectifying and doing on a per case basis, like he mentioned, was the mortar and the Cerberus cannon and the TOWs, because that secondary fall off and the MOAB got affected by the change. So he's looking at those, he's adjusting them. The MOAB got substantially boosted. I think there's still some more room for improvement there as for the MOAB as a whole, because you figure like it still doesn't do nearly enough damage. That's something that him and I are going to regroup on going into next week, is look at some of those. Because we were doing some early testing last night with them. So I just want to bring that up as like a little couple of things to just kind of throw out there on experimental more than anything. Because everything we're talking about is live on experimental right now. Now there's going to be another build on experimental. After I do this, there's going to be a suite of severity evacuation fixes and other fixes that are coming in after this podcast. But it's going to be everything we talk about right now is what's going in. So, is there anything else, Leon, you want to add on before I move on to the next section?
No, I mean, I basically got over the stuff. I mean, the landscaping that was added or decreased in cost of removal was when the civilian stuff got pushed out. I mean, what most people noticed on day one that the militia was still too hard, and I did a massive nerf on them. So if they still overrun you, please let me know.
And that's another important point, is that we've been doing tests throughout the week on the civilian evacuation. And one of the things that came up a lot, I was talking to someone in general comms before we started this podcast, was the militia and how quickly they are on you in terms of basically like their response time. So one of the things that I did was that I decreased the not even decrease. I increased the amount of time of how often they have to wait to launch another uprising attack on you. Initially, it was a little too like dev oriented, of like very like if once your reputation in a zone got below like 80, it increased the chance of a militia group forming. Now, if you stopped committing war crimes and you turned off martial law and you didn't overpopulate your zone, after about a couple minutes, your civilian reputation would start ticking back upwards. And if you're evacuating, it'll go even faster. But the key thing is that he entered, I think it was digital, entered a forever loop where basically he couldn't like properly stop the reputation from ticking down, because the cost of overpopulation was so high earlier in the week that like if you just filled like 6 wall buildings over 100 population percent, if it was between 100 and 130, it would basically, those like 6 or so buildings would nuke your reputation over 12 minutes to the point where you would start to get uprisings. And we couldn't figure it out. We were playing a session and we were like, what is going on? Like, why is our reputation still going down? Like, what the fuck? So I did nerf that. Overpopulation is a lot more forgiving between 100 and 120. And then after 120, it starts to scale linearly towards 200 to be a greater impact. And it does a trickle effect where it's like, okay, like we're going to hurt you a little bit, and then it's going to increase a little bit slowly over time. And it's a lot more forgiving for the reputation. So that's another thing to keep in mind going into like this next week and this weekend, is let us know how the reputation tick feels. Because by all intents and purposes, our goal is to get to a point by like next Wednesday where like all the major evacuation systems and mechanics are in. And then that way, like we can start to like, okay, let's balance it. Let's tweak this. Let's change that efficiency. And then let's get it ready to push out to everyone on the default build, because we're trying to get to that point in the next week or so. Okay, so that kind of handles some of the balance aspects of what's been kind of plaguing the militia. And from that standpoint, so just be aware of that. Purging and condemning. Purging's still going to screw you, but condemning doesn't hurt your reputation. So I can condemn this, and it's not going to hurt me. Now, what is going to hurt me is that these people are going to move to another structure like this one. And then the moment it goes to 120-ish is when it's going to start to really hurt your reputation in the zone, because you're densely packing them like sardines in the actual, like, the zones. So if you don't have a flow, if you don't have a plan in terms of where these people are going to go, or at least A to B to C to D, and then moving linearly backwards, and you're just dumping 3 zones into 1 zone, but your output for evacuation is not fast enough, you're going to have problems. And we're going to be looking at those from a balance standpoint more going into next week, because it's going to be a juggling effect while we kind of move some systems around and coordinate with y'all to figure out what feels right. But you can see in this example, I'm condemning it, great, and then no one's allowed back into this zone. So that's working, that's functional. You guys have already seen that before. But I just wanted to basically showcase that really quickly. Now, the next thing, let me go into my test map, because we're going to talk about some of the civilian evacuation stuff real fast. So in the test map that we've set up here, you can see that one of the issues that we were encountering, or we were playing with people on the public Discord, was the transfer of populations were too efficient. And I'm sure you guys have experienced this when you were playing yourself, is telling everyone in Zone D to move to Zone B virtually via, like, the people that just, pick up their stuff and move, was really fast. So if I do this, and I click on this little evacuate to us eyedropper, you'll see that everyone in this zone is set to now move to Zone B. And we slowed down the transfer of population by about 80%, give or take. And the other change that we did was it's no longer a round robin. So what was happening is that when these zones were emptying, these structures, it was filling them in all of the buildings across the entire zone equally. The problem is that you would get people being populated on the other side of a zone or in the middle of your zone. And then your buses would never actually have to leave the initial building location, because those buildings would get filled so quickly and so randomly that basically it'd be like, oh, like, we're just going to, like, you could basically just build 3 bus depots and evacuate these structures forever, and they would never have to go out, because the virtual transferring was just too efficient. So you'll notice with the change that I did, these buildings are going to fill this structure, and then they're going to fill that one, and then they're going to fill this one, then that one, and then that one, is the idea. So it's simulating the virtual transfer of people, like, over time, basically, based off of proximity of the requesting role building. And then it's like, hey, who's closest to your zone? Okay, great. Let's fill that to 200. Because there was a bug that was earlier in the week where zone transfers were limited to 100% instead of 200. So you couldn't actually transfer people reliably between zones. So that was something that I fixed and we shadow patched earlier in the week on Steam. And then you can see this one's filled, so now it's going to fill this one. So now it's going to fill this structure, and then that's going to be 200. And then you figure over time, that's going to affect my CERC reputation, and I'm going to incur penalties of, like, okay, what are you doing to get these people out, kind of deal. So again, that is going to be a point of contention going into next week for balance. So please, 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 please try it out. See how you like this aspect of the balance, and then write a thread, post it in the master thread, tag us on the Discord, and let us know if it feels fun or if it feels kind of rough, kind of deal. You don't like it. You want things changed. It's too fast, X, Y, and Z. That is the most meaningful thing that we can get right now in terms of these systems interaction. So by the time we aim to kind of get all of this pushed out to everyone, we have your active feedback now rather than later. But you can see this one's about to empty, great, and the zone's emptying, and it's almost 10 people left. So this one and this one are being emptied now. Groovy, that got filled, that got filled. Okay, so yeah, they all went into these 3 structures for 3 to 3. So a perfect 1-to-1 ratio of 100, 100, 100% across the board. And then now it's overpopulated, so slowly but surely this is going to tick down. And this did get nerfed substantially. That's going to be something I'm going to be looking at for balancing too, is figuring out how long it should take for an overpopulated density to start to rebel and affect your overall reputation. So the next element that we need to show is efficiency. So we didn't really talk about this too much, is that last week you saw that I was hiring people, and as I hired them, they would show up. So if I hire someone for intake, you'll see we add this little sexy little material effect that says, hey, I paused the game, by the way, let me pause it, is that, hey, you hired someone, it's one of two, that one guy is en route, and he's going to be there soon. So then you're like, okay, great. I see the little material effect. I'm going to look for him. Oh, there he is. So what happens? When he arrives at the destination, you're going to see the chevron go white. So now he's reported in for duty, and he is now applying an efficiency to the division as a whole. So you can see that now the intake facility is operating at 50% efficiency. If I hire another person, he's going to come out of the closest staffing center, the housing center per se, and then he's going to basically go to his pre-assigned spot, and then now you're going to notice the efficiency is going to go to 100. Just to do a quick recap of what that does, it improves how quickly they can process people through their division as a whole. Efficiencies are segmented based off of like divisions as a whole. So if you have, let's say, 4 evacuation sites and you only hire 2 guys, those 2 guys are working on all of the evacuation sites. So you can hire more to increase the output of that entire division's like efficiency as a whole, or you can be cheap and hire 1 or 2 or 3. And then all of those structures will operate at 20% efficiency, 40% efficiency. And I'll show you an example of that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to build another one of the staff housing structures. And I'm going to turn off that stupid debug. And boom. Okay, so now I have another one up. And I'm going to go over here, and you're going to see that the bar increased of how many people I can hire. So now I'm going to add a couple more structures so we can get an intake functional. So we're going to build some euthanization. We're going to build some of the cages, if I'm not blind. So we're going to put that there, and we're going to put that there. Then we're going to slow-mo 10 because I'm impatient. So one of the things that I do want to kind of draw on here is these structures are going to be changing about next week. You're going to notice that these structures are going to have check-in points or like little kiosks or desks assigned with them where the staff member goes when they're assigned to it, and that's where to be where they occupy. Because in earlier playtests and just what we were watching when people were like share screening for us on Discord earlier in the week is that if you built these too densely packed together, the staff member has a redundancy system built in where if they can't reach the physical location that they've been assigned to assign for work, it will teleport them. And what will happen is that if this structure is built like right here, it will teleport the staff member right here. They still do their job. They're still working. It just looks stupid. So one of the things that we're going to be doing, just to kind of throw that out there, is kind of how the barracks has those no build borders, those little boxes on the left and right that we added based off of a lot of the feedback that we've gotten over the years of like landing on stupid locations, like on walls and on like areas that are navigable, is we're going to be doing the same thing for some of these staff structures. So you're going to notice that this area is going to have a cordoned off area around the ladder here and the ladder and the little staircase here. And then the same thing for like the hold here, like where we added a little mock-up one of my artists was playing with, where you have an arrow, so you understand the flow of movement. Like they're going to go in that arrow. But later next week, we're going to be invalidating and blocking out that area, kind of similar to how Age of Empires does, where the imprint's a little bit larger in key areas to just let you know, okay, the arrow there lets me know where people enter. So if I block that, that's on you. But the invalidation makes it to where like you can't like block it like too close to the door, like invalidate it completely. So it adds some layer of failure there where it's like, okay, great. Like, let's see if it'll let me break it. Because like you can see right there. Oh no, he added in. You can see right there. So that's kind of like that Age of Empires approach that you see in Age of Empires 4, where you can that acts as like, okay, great. That's my canal of like that guarantees that the people can enter that structure because that clears that space from a design standpoint. So that's something that was put in as we tested it earlier in the week, and that's going to be a trickle-down effect to every structure in the entire game related to the severity evacuation to remove more points of failure that we've identified while we've been watching people play the game. So there's that. I went off on a spiel. But anyway, let me unpause it. I'm going to hire. Keep in mind, you can hire here. You don't have to click here and hire here. you can click on any one of these structures that are in that division, hire said unit, and then they will automatically just pick one of the random structures, report for duty, and then start adding to the efficiency of that division as a whole. So you can see this guy is moving to a position over here. And then once he's here, he's at 50%. And this position is going to be closer, and there's going to be like an actual like module or like booth that's added where people come to that booth before they're checked in, and they basically, that's the flow that we're going towards. So now I'm going to turn on the intake. The bus is going to go do its thing, take out that street light because Kool-Aid Man is fun. And I'm going to hire someone for evacuation. I'm going to hire some for research to figure that out. And then I'm not going to euthanize anyone because I don't feel like dealing with militia groups. One of the things that we did do is that we have been hammering on the intake bus and the efficiency of transfers. There are still points of failure. Not going to bullshit anyone. There are going to be points going into next week where things break down, and that civilian, I noticed that civilians still sometimes get stuck on the holding cells and their transfer to the evacuation site. We are aware of that, and we are tracking every permutation or variation of that as we speak. And that's something that's going to be a major goal going into next week, is trying to figure out those edge cases and completely eradicate them. Because you can see, based off of some of the other stuff that we did, is that we put a registration system in, like, basically as people show up, they reserve a spot outside your intake. Great, groovy, it looks better. You don't get these weird, like, abominations from Dead Space where you have, like, 10 mobs on top of each other. That was dog shit. We fixed that. I'm sure there's some edge cases where it can still occur, but we're going to fix them and rectify them as it comes through it. Like, there's a failure right there. So that has to be fixed. But you can see that the mobs are coming through. They're being screened at the little point. So they wait here for their number to be called. And then they go here, they get scanned, they get processed, and then they go to intake. And then they have their incubation time of checking to see if they're infected. And then if they pass, then they go to the holding, they go to either euthanization or they go to the evacuation. Now, there was a bug. The reason why we delayed the podcast so late is that I recently did a revamp to how helicopters land, and we're going to get into that in a second because it's perfectly segues into the next point. But I had to fix something with the evacuation. So Dimitri has also been tweaking and kind of sprucing up some of the camo and the colors for the evacuation helicopters. Personally, I think it would look better if more of a helicopter medevac color. If you guys can kind of tell me in the chat or in Discord, do you guys like that color scheme for this Chinook? Would you prefer a more like white or like medevac color that's not as like on the nose for the CERC yellow? So let me know what you guys think about that on Discord and on YouTube chat and on Steam store page. Preferably now or on YouTube later on in post. Let me know what you think. I'm going to read it, take all of that into account, because this is the first time I've seen it. I told him to come up with the color scheme, and this is what he came up with for his first pass. I don't hate it, but I don't love it. So I'm just kind of curious what other people think as well. So I'm going to kind of see what people are saying. While they write that out on Discord, I'm going to move on and give some people some time to formulate their opinions. So you can see we have a flow. People are coming in, they're being intaked, they're being evacuated, things are working. It is better than what it was before last Saturday, which was a shit show in terms of catastrophic failure across the board. Because there are so many moving parts with a civilian evacuation, it has kicked our ass for 4 weeks. It's going to continue to kick our ass for another week or two, give or take. So you figure, now I'm going to set the other zones to evacuate. And then let's see if I can cause a catastrophic failure. So we're going to double down on building some more bus depots. And that was the other thing that we did, was that we changed the way that the bus depots, the buses themselves, interact with the depots. We changed and we added these little borders. Because I was watching people play, and the infected and the vehicles and the CERC would just run through it. And it was so derpy and stupid looking. But I was like, okay, Dimitri, we need a wall. We need some kind of like border or cordon. Operators can jump over it if they really try, but there has to be something there so that Ajaxes and Cerberuses are just driving through the evacuation camp, and it just looks stupid. So that's another like small little change that we got snuck in over the week. It looks beautiful. I love it. I like the idea of it. It looks cool. Yes, we're going to put flares back in. Those are coming. Those are the nice things to have, but they aren't mission critical as it stands right now. Right now, my utmost important is to get the flow working, fix the bugs of just what we have now, and just kind of like spruce all that up in terms of the efficiency. And then we're going to get to the double helicopters. We're going to get to where the mobs understand how to directly walk between zones. It's something like the last line items we're going to be doing, because the buses are kind of like the biggest point of contention that we've had realistically with our doctor loops and their other tweaks. So let me look to see what people are saying in the chat. Someone said hot pink. Hell no. Let's see. No one actually said a legitimate color on YouTube. So let me see. Let me go ahead and let me see if it's causing a catastrophic failure. Are we evacuating? We're evacuating there. We're evacuating there. Okay, cool. I think that evacuation rate is way too efficient still. It is. Well, I mean, then again, those populations were only debug populations of 200 or so. So maybe that is fine. Because what's happening is that you figure these buildings are still getting filled way too fast. These two have not been touched. So that's interesting. Intake is still flowing. We haven't gotten the churn that we get sometimes where like mobs will sometimes cluster outside the holding areas. Sometimes you'll get like 3 or 4 mobs, so you have to just lob a grenade on them to kill them. So then that way the system resumes. Because you'll notice that with the rebuild, see right here, pause, civilian processing at capacity. In Legacy, it was the wild, wild fucking west. We would evacuate so many mobs that would blow up your computer. Like if you owned up Legacy, like you could get like so many of these guys. That's why your performance always went in the crapper in Legacy, because there weren't enough limits in place. So that was the one thing that we kind of sought to rectify with the rebuild. And then once we get the baseline functionality working and that everything's functional and it's not breaking anymore, then we're going to start to tune up the efficiency and make it faster, add upgrades. And that way we can increase the output per se, and try and maintain the limits we've already established of around roughly 150 people moving at any given time is roughly what we allow, 15 mobs globally. But that's going to come down to basically just testing and figuring out like what we can support, what the engine can support, and maintaining performance and potentially adding some custom flags that people that like to live dangerously can essentially turn it up really goddamn high. So let me turn on night vision so I can still see. And what we're going to do is, this is a perfect case of basically we don't have enough. Yeah, let's see. What's the problem here? So what's the bottleneck? What is the bottleneck? So are we processing fast enough? Because it says we are processing at capacity. Okay, so I think what we can do in this case is we're going to build another one of these evacuation centers. So we're going to put down another one of the evacuation sites. And we're going to build you here. And we're going to build another one here. And then we're going to slow-mo 10. Oh, that's a bug. Are you stuck, little Timmy? Yeah, you are, little. Okay, I'm gonna note that down to Dimitri. Is that he's gonna have to increase the validation, because you figure something's going on where they think that, yeah, the collision is not accurate enough for that object, is what that tells me. Yeah, that's the collision issue. Okay, I got that on recording, so we're gonna look into that. So we'll fix that going into Monday, because that's a decent. Let me see. Show navigation. There's your issue right there. That's strip. That fucking strip. Okay. Yeah, we'll look into that. That's easy. Because let me see. Let me turn off night vision so it doesn't warp it. Yeah, I know exactly what that is. Okay, groovy. So we'll fix that. So anyway, now that I hired this, you'll see that the efficiency is at 33%, because the staff are now evenly distributed across all of those sites. So even the ones that are over here are virtually helping out all of these. And then you figure there's the helicopter, and let's see how we're going to do. Intake, and then let's see if we can't hire another one of the holding cells. We're going to add a couple more. We're going to do a couple more of those. We're going to hire some security just because it looks cool. And they're going to do their dynamic. That was the other thing, is that these guys now wait about, I think it's about 2 to 3 minutes at each gargoyle position, is what I call them from a programming standpoint. But they'll dynamically patrol around your base around these. So every one of those structures is now under their area of influence. If they come under attack, they will defend that structure. Now, there is a bug that someone showed me last night in relation to them for spitters, is they don't perfectly understand how to respond to a spitter. So they will effectively run to where the spitter dot is burning the wall instead of running to the point of who shot the spit. So they need to ignore spitter acid piles in their processing logic, and they just need to respond to who shot said projectile, because that's getting them killed. Because then they run to the acid pool, and then they kill themselves on said acid pool. So I'm aware of that. It was shown to me last night when we were field testing another bug, which we'll go into towards the end. And that's something that I'm going to be seeking to rectify going into Monday. But you can see that the evacuation system is beautifully working. No odd embarrassments this time of the system breaking down. I'm cautiously optimistic that I'm going to be able to evacuate everyone on the entire map, on this test map. This is going to be released to everyone on experimental after this podcast, so y'all can go play it and try it out for yourself with your friends or by yourself, and then write up your threads of whatever you like or whatever you hate. There are still some debug logs here and there. Just keep in mind, that's for us, that's for you. You see certain things, bring it to our attention. Let us know the circumstance of it, because we are trying to work as efficiently, as quickly as possible to get this to a point of completion so that we can then work on all the other items on our list. And you can see there's our mob splitting system, where it's splitting off people to keep the system efficient and lean. How many people are left? Let's see. Is everyone in the pipe? Oh yeah, it's only these 2 structures remain. Groovy. That's far better than what we got last week from last week's podcast, where basically I think we were only able to evacuate around 100 to 200 people before the entire system catastrophically melted down. So you figure there's progress. This is a failure. This is a catastrophic failure. Let's see if I can salvage them. Yeah, this does happen. So technically, this would never happen in real life because we don't allow level designers to build curves like this. But what happens is that the bus turns this curve and doesn't understand the nuance of going over this edge. You'll notice that all of our ramps have a skirt on the left and the right side to block the vehicle pathfinding from thinking they can just yeet themselves off that edge. That is a vulnerability in our Pathfinder, or rather I'll show you. Okay, little Timmy, I need you to move. That is a vulnerability in our Pathfinder, where basically when they do their traces, they will effectively not detect fall-offs or ramps. Riff showed me the other day with his Abrams. He lost his Abrams over a bridge because the Abrams didn't understand the nuance of this. Let's see if he's going to do it. He doesn't understand the nuance of that's a dip there, there's a fall there. So it's something that we need to basically, so when you're around bridges for the time being, that's something that we need to rectify after civilian evacuation is more polished going into next week, ideally, is that's an edge case that we're going to need to improve for like their fall, I'm going to die detection, where it's like, it's great they detect walls and obstacles and other stuff around them, but they don't fully understand, if I drive off of this, I'm going to die. So that's something that we're going to have to fix. So let me return back to base. Are you going to do it? Or is it because it's probably because I interrupted him that I fucked up his AI. Yeah, because you're not allowed to control the buses in real gameplay. We only do it in in the editor. So that way we can really quickly course correct them. And we can figure out when a failure point occurs, where it's coming from. So yeah, now it fixes. Because there was probably a lingering move order in it, if I would have guessed. Not sure. That's a failure clause right there. Okay, so yeah, there's a good little failure right there. I'm gonna just screenshot that. But yeah, that is generally in a whim how that works now. Now, what I'm gonna show now is I'm gonna show one of the other things that people were showing us earlier in the week. Is that you notice that there's these little like debug boxes that appear around the entrances to structures, because we were noticing that people weren't realizing that these doors matter. So they were building entire bases outside a door and then wondering why the civilian evacuation wasn't working. And it was because you were literally blocking their exit point. So you can see the moment I blocked it, it flags it. Meaning I can't leave this building. You're going to need to destroy whatever's in the way. Whether it be something you built, another faction built, or a landscapable object. Now, we are looking at some of the world buildings in the map because this did trigger an audit of some of the world buildings that we transitioned over to Legacy. Because you can see right there, building has been blocked, civilian operations in this zone are hampered. So fix it, kind of deal. It looks like some militia groups just spawned out of that building. Who did I piss off? Is there overpopulation somewhere? Oh, yeah, that one and that one. These two are negatively affecting me now because of the overpopulation. And that's what I mean in terms of efficiency. We're going to really have to ratchet those up a little bit because like those two are like heavily weighting linearly towards affecting your rep. And I got to find a good baseline for that going into next week of Leon. But this is the key thing. This actually, boom, you delete that, they can get out now, even if that one's blocked. So we put quite a bit of time of R&D in earlier, in the mid to end part of this week, to figure that out and to set that up for the AI as a system to help you figure out, hey, I physically can't leave this building. Please help me. So that got put in. I think it was Atlas and a couple other people we were playing co-op with, and they were literally building like their entire base, walls, barracks, like on every wall building, and not really thinking about the ramifications of like, oh wait, people have to leave these structures. So there's a thing there that kind of got in, and that's a nice little quality of life over Legacy, which never had that to begin with. And I think that adds a lot more nuance to just how you're planning out your evacuations. These buses are going to trigger me. Hold on. Boop. Boop. And boop. Let's see if they're going to fail. So the other thing we did is that we did add a failure clause where if the bus will no longer get stuck on these supporting arms, we saw that happening quite a bit in some of the earlier builds this week and last week when civilian evacuation first came out, is that the buses would interact violently with these pillars and then permanently get stuck and break down your entire evacuation loop. So we did fix that. Let us know if there's any other edge cases for that. But that was a huge hamper to just overall civilian evacuation efficiency. You can see that now the buses are, let's see what they're doing. Yeah, they're still doing their thing. And we did add some logic. There were some people that were talking to us on public Discord about like, well, why don't you just make it to where they just get as close as they can on the road nav and then that's it. So they do. This blue is the road nav. And the idea is that they will stay on the road unless they absolutely have to get closer. So they're a lot more reasonable in terms of how close they have to get. They should no longer try to Kool-Aid man up to the door of a building and then park on that door. They should stay a minimum of 50 to 80 feet away from every door at any given point, or at least lock into a nearby road and then do that instead. And if they realize that they're close enough, they'll just make the mob walk over. So that way they don't do a bunch of micro movements of like, well, I'm going to move 10 feet. I'm going to move 10 more feet. No, just stay where you are, and the mobs can walk a block to come to you. It's fine. And what we did was we put in a system where essentially the mobs... oh, God damn it. I don't have anyone military. Okay, I'll have to reset in a second. But you figure we put in a system where the buses and the vehicles also got a Pathfinder fix that kind of like feeds into this a little bit, where there was a bug that someone showed me earlier in the week, and I think it would have fixed a good majority of the remaining issues with some of the vehicle pathfinding when it came to buildings interactions, is that if you did this, recreate the scenario. And this applies to sandbags, barbed wire, whatever. Anything that basically would affect their navigation in some shape, manner, or form. What we noticed was that why they would ram into objects sometimes was a failure in terms of how far they were determining they could physically move. And it was basically a desync between the brain and effectively the handling, the input. Because the vehicles are programmed in a way where the AI is driving it as if a real person is. So they're applying steering, they're applying throttling. There's no like backdoor cheap way that we're doing it. And that leads into like something that I mentioned on the roadmap, so operators can physically drive the vehicles. Because technically the AI are driving as if they're a real person. That's why you see this speed and this throttling and like the steering margin left to right, forward and back. But you'll notice that when I did this, sometimes if this was marked to yellow, they would basically just like, yeah, let's see if it does it. No, it doesn't. Okay, you can see they give up. They don't attempt to crash through the infantry gate. Or in other versions, little Timmy here would see a sandbag or a barbed wire or an ammo tent and be like, well, technically I can reach that if I try hard enough. And what they would do is they would ram into the sandbag and go over it. So like earlier in the week, if I did this, they would basically see that, so this is the bug, is that in our pathfinding code, it would do a projection here. It would be like, technically there's nav here. And that there was no process of elimination of saying, well, it doesn't matter that there's nav here. You can't physically reach here because this nav area has now changed. You're not allowed to fit through an infantry gate, so that's not applicable to you. And the system would be like, fuck it. It's valid. So what I ended up doing was I overrid it and wrote some additional functionality where if I bring up the AI debugger, you're going to notice that instead of having it to where they try and Kool-Aid man their way through, they will move as close as the system will allow them. So like you figure they're going to move as close as they can, which is roughly around here, and then give up. And in the previous versions, they would have just drove right through the fence and then got stuck in the fence. And as far as I know, this fixed a lot of the lingering pathfinding issues. It's already live on experimental. It's been live on there for a couple of days since I made the patch for note on Discord. So I'm sure there's still some variations of it breaking. I think Rift showed me one, but then could not recreate it after trying it for another 10 minutes. So it's one of those things where there's still one edge case that still fails. I gotta find that motherfucker because you figure it is the devil in terms of basically the Pathfinder. Because something is still saying, well, technically there's nav over there. Who cares about the object in the center of us? And it will basically just take off. So you can see this system, and then if I do this, and then I issue a remove order, then he'll know, oh, it's open now. Now, I guess you could make the argument that we do need to kind of probably add like a dynamic delegate there. So that way, if the nav status changes in the middle of a movement, they can retask and know the door is opened and then re-queue it based off of a tile. It's something that we could do long-term from an R&D standpoint because you can see that there's a nice little quality of life that could happen there. But like, 'cause if I do this, let's see if it's going to work. Oh, I shouldn't have opened the gate. I should have changed it to manual. Technically, I think you can break their Pathfinder if you do this fast enough. So this, and then you change it to manual. Oh, no, I fixed that too. Never mind. That does work. But that might have been because I was in slow-mo and I was so fast about it. Nope, it still breaks. So that might have been the variation that Rift discovered, where there's a little desync that we need to fix or improve rather, where the structure, the vehicle when moving can register with the zone or the tile that it's in and be like, oh, well, I need to listen for updates. So it's something that we're going to have to improve here and there. But this is a pretty substantial change to the overall Pathfinder and just how it handles failure states. That was good, because that would have previously have tried to ram its way forcibly through the wall. So let us know how the new Pathfinder is for the vehicles and what kind of issues you run into. if you can record it, if you can tag a dev on Discord, me, Derek, or Michael, then that way we can set up a time to get on Discord and you can show us edge cases or things where it breaks. Because we still need to kind of have another community sit down and do a co-op session like we did a month or so ago, and have people just sit in the room and just in a co-op session with devs, and we just host a game and they just break the AI in front of us. And then we just write down some notes, we record it, we have a good time, and then we come back in a week and we basically just, see what you guys can do. Because that's how the vehicle pathfinding got as good as it is now. It's a lot better than what it ever was in Legacy, but there's still that last 10%. And that last 10% is what keeps you up at night, because it's the small little edge cases when systems when they interact, that makes it to where it's like perfect storm in terms of different things occurring and events happening and things being built at the same time. So that's something that we're looking into, and that's something that we're tracking. So just be aware of that, and there are some improvements to be known of. The other thing that I do want to bring up is that the euthanization structure did get a little bit of a facelift. This is the direction that we're going into. We did shrink the size by about 80%. And then we did add it to where there's an upgrade system that we're working on going into next week, where you can upgrade the euthanization center and you can increase the burn rate and you can increase the capacity of how many dead bodies they can process. Dead bodies basically just got piled and filled in over here in this side reservoir. This version of the asset's already in, and you can see a little storage system that we have down there for that underground tunnel connected to an elevator, a lift elevator over here. So that's in, that got situated, that's groovy and that's working. Let me see if I can burn some people. So that way I can show you guys the new system. Is that if you click here, it basically now shows you the recently deceased, and it shows you if they were infected. So then that way, if you're killing a lot of people that weren't infected, they'll tell on the post-mortem if they weren't. And then you can know if you're horrible or not. So the idea is that way you're like, okay, cool. I know that my system's efficient. My policies are set up correctly. Great. And obviously that's one of the lingering systems that's going to be coming sometime next week, is having it to where you can change the civilian orders and change how the rules work of how they intake people. That's one of the last systems that are going to be coming in next week. You'll also notice that we turned on bus and walk again. So if you change it to bus only, virtual transferring is turned off, and they have to wait for a bus to physically come and pick them up. If we change it to people only, then they'll only do the virtual transfer, and that will segue into what I talked about earlier, where you'll start to see people just randomly show up and walking to your bases instead of the buses having to come and get them. And then you can do the default setting, which is buses and people. So that's groovy, that's in, and it works. The only thing I would say is you're not going to actually see mobs like not having to go to the intake first, the bus first. That's going to be coming next week after all the other systems are polished, is that you'll see mobs just leave this structure. And instead of having to do the intermediary step of going to the bus, which adds on time, they'll instead go from this building straight to the intake and cut that step in half, which will make your efficiency rates double, because you don't have to worry about that. Everyone will just run out of these buildings and immediately just run here. So we wanted to get the bus perfected and perfect and great, and then we were going to move on to those systems that are like kind of in there in an incubation form, but we need to spend a day or so just kind of finessing them and getting them to a point of having it to where you guys can interact with those systems. So just be aware, we haven't forgotten about those things, and they're coming going into next week. But just based off of the churn, the bugs, and just the sheer amount of mechanics and supporting systems that were needed to get civilian evacuation in on top of the other crazy stuff, it's just been taking a little bit longer than we'd like. Let me check my notes. Got that. Got the evac texture. Oh, right. We did put in, let me see if I can show you guys this. So I'm going to do that, do this, move him, and then we're going to turn on evac. And then I know this happens to me when I was playing, and I was talking to people on the Discord, and they were like, where are my buses? And I was like, well, shit, he's right. So what we did is we put this in, so it selects the bus, and it moves you to them. So if you're ever unsure where your bus is hiding, if you think it's broken, if you think it's stuck somewhere, you can just click on the depot, press the hotkey, or click on it, and it will jump you to the bus and select it. And obviously, if it's in the viewport, it won't do anything. It'll just select the bus. So that's a quick little way where you could hotkey your evacuation buses or your sites. So I hotkeyed that. Great, it's selected. And then if I press 1, it selects that. So I could have it to where it's like 1 and then T. Great. Now I can cycle through my buses or have different bus stations that are in key points that I can jump to them at a moment's notice and know exactly what they're doing and what's going on with them. So that was a small little change that we got in over the course of the week, just to kind of iron out and add some improvements over legacy. Let's see what we got here. We covered the vehicle pathfinding fixes. We covered the block detection. We showed the message log. Oh, noob traps. So one of the noob traps from legacy, and this was another thing that I was talking to people on Discord, and we didn't realize how confusing it was to people, is people didn't understand the difference between active intake and evacuation target. So it didn't get in this week because I need to rename this. This is going to be renamed to migration target instead of evacuation target, because people don't seem to, these two are so closely related that I didn't understand the distinction there. So the idea is that, like, if you go to Z, instead of saying evacuation target, instead of saying like migration target or something, and then you click here, and then you can see it's this zone Z, zone B is let's see. No, hold on. Oh wait, hold on. Is that a bug? Hold on. That is a bug. We're gonna have to fix that. Okay, I see a bug visually, but we'll fix that. Is that if I click this, you'll see that the evacuation target for D is now to move to B. But the problem is that there's a visual bug where B should be the one that's highlighted, but for some reason C is. Because any active evacuation zone where you click on this drop down should be blue to give you active feedback without being like, well, where did I build the evacuation? Was it over there? Was it here? So the idea is that you can click on this, and in a moment's notice, you can say, oh, E and A are my active intakes. So then I can click on A, and then you don't have to remember. So that was the other thing that we did, was we put that in there, and obviously it's going to have to be fixed because there's a little visual bug going on there. But if I click here, you'll see that I can't set the evacuation target for an active intake zone because people weren't understanding what you were effectively doing if you turned on active intake and then you set an evacuation target is people were coming to your zone and then they were immediately told to leave. And I had people on public Discord like, why isn't my evacuation working, Dark? What's wrong? What am I doing wrong? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, let me go, holy fuck. You have your evacuation target and your intake set, which is a noob trap. So we grayed out. And for whatever reason, if you set it, it'll clear it. So if I do this, and then I set it to like E, and then I do that, it clears it. Because the top stack, the priority order is intake. So that way, the noob trap from Legacy is gone. It's dead the way of the dinosaur, and it's not going to confuse people anymore. Because there are some other noob traps in civilian orders that are going to be removed. There were like small little edge cases where some combinations of orders didn't really do anything. And it was just because, like, okay, so it's like that's why policies are kind of being saved for the end. Because there's technically 2 policies that are missing. Shoot them immediately after you determine that they're infected and turn them away and send them back to the zone to be killed. I.e. they'll die by attrition, by the infected eventually coming and killing them. So those will mark those populations as unevacuatable, and that will make it to where you'll get a surviving population that were turned away and you just can't evacuate them. And it's just going to be the population in that zone that you turned away at one time or another because your staff could not ascertain their infection status, or they were infected, but your policies dictated, we're not going to touch you, go back to where you came from, wait to die, basically. But we don't want to incur the reputational loss of shooting you on the spot, so we're just going to tell you to go and shelter in place. So that's basically another mechanic or system that's coming in next week, because you figure that's going to kind of be like what ties into what I talked about before, for having those mobs being able to directly come to your zone and then be able to go directly back to that wall building. Is the same time we work on that system, is the same time that we're going to be working on those policies, which is basically like, think of them, it's not even really an edict. It's more so of like, how do you handle an unknown? How do you handle an infected person? And how do you handle a not-infected person? And what's the 3 rules? Your primary one, your secondary, and your off-flow order. So an example would be as a primary is that if you're not infected, go to the evacuation target. And if there's an overflow, wait, basically. And then wait would be the third one where you just want them to wait in place until they can find an evacuation pad to go to. And then another example would be is that they were infected. Or actually, if they were unknown when they're intaked, then they would go to you could set them to immediately go to euthanization, or you could set them to immediately go to the holding cages. So you can choose right off the rip. I don't want to take the chance. I don't give a damn about the civilian incursions, the militia. I'm playing Umbrella. I'm not even going to pretend to play a nice guy. Then when that system comes in next week, you'd be able to click here, click unknown, or rather infected, sorry. Or you could do unknown. I don't really care what you do. But let's say in this case, if you're going to be evil, you'd set it to unknown, and you'd be like, oh, I don't know what they are. Burn everyone. So like basically you would set unknown, you would set euthanization, and then you would say wait. Or you could have it to where if they were unknown, you could send them to the holding area, the little research labs. And then if that is basically overfilled, you could send the overfill to the euthanization tent to be killed. So that way, no matter what, the flow is still going. So it gives you options in terms of like, it's basically like conditionals, where it's like your primary order. What do you do as a waiting option? And then basically like, based off of the second one, it typically puts you in one or two buckets. Or it kills you immediately at the end of that secondary order, or that like wait order or whatever, or otherwise it sends you to another division to be processed through on that intake policy option, whatever. So that's something that's going to be coming in next week. I know we're working with the community to basically identify and kind of like iron out the kinks and just see about the efficiency and whatnot. Because again, it's going to be kind of slow here and there at points in the intake flow while we're just addressing it. Because you can see right here, no one's moving because I haven't hired an intake staff. And because no one is basically manning no one's manning the research, default policy says burn everyone. But you can't set that right now, but I'll show you what I mean. So let me close you. We're in slow-mo 10, and you'll see what happens. So it's setting them to euthanization. So they're going to be burned alive. Now, obviously, in the civilian orders that come next week, you'd be able to say, I don't care. If there's no one at research, just wait until I build the structure. And there would be no auxiliary order that gets sent if the prerequisite is not met. So now they're going to go there. They got killed. Great. View recently deceased. Takes a couple of seconds to liquidate them. They were all healthy. They all died. You're a horrible person. So you figure that's the general gist. And it just basically associates a name. And then it associates their healthy status, if they were infected or not. And then this UI is still a mock-up. It will get some improvements before the final version goes out. This all supports replication and multiplayer. So you can sit here and you can literally just watch this. And it will update in real time. But you can see this is a little crude example of where, because I did not build the little like research cages, the policy is set as a backup order to just kill them all. The show must go on. We must still process. We must get the output out, the throughput. And if I built that cage for determining their infection status, because these are all unknowns. So they're basically saying, I don't know who these people are. I don't want to take the chance, kill them all. And obviously in the future, you'd be able to just have them get shot on the site going into next week, or we just have them move to a point and then someone shoots them. And then the other option is they just be told to go leave. So like you would see them basically just run back to a world building. I get this is the thing, and I didn't realize this until I'm thinking about it right now, is that there was an issue in Legacy where people didn't understand why certain populations never got evacuated. And I realize now that was a UX issue, because those surviving populations were either dynamic civilian groups or they were people that were untouchables, that were like CERC or your settings dictated that they were not to be shot, and they would be reintegrated back to a world building, and they were never going to be evacuated. Like the system was never going to allow them to come back into intake because they were infected, and they hadn't turned yet because they were basically carriers for Chelsea. So that's the biggest thing, is like there's a whole layer of UI that needs to come in to build on those misunderstandings that are our fault, because we didn't give people enough visual indicators to actually create meaningful decisions in Legacy. It was a good idea on paper, but poor fucking execution in terms of basically like, there's no game that does it. It's great, it's fun, but there's not enough like idea. There's not enough of what's going on is properly depicted and displayed. Like for example, these mobs are going to have a details panel UI down here where it's going to show you what they're thinking. So that's something that we're working on right now. It got delayed a little bit because we prototyped that with the buses, where you can click on them and you can see what they're thinking at any given time. The same thing is coming to the mobs. So you would know there's an intake issue. They're waiting for a slot at the holding area. They're waiting for a slot at euthanization. And then you can solve those problems by just going around clicking on the mobs and figuring out where your efficiency issues. Because by all intents and purposes, this is an entire like sub-game in Cepheus of evacuation. So you could be playing this entirely in the corner and still running a war on the front line, and they still are meaningfully hurting Chelsea in terms of basically the mid to late game, where it's a high upkeep, it's a high startup cost. There's obviously an upkeep cost, but once you start getting the machine running, you're going to benefit in the mid to late game by taking away those desirable biomass resources from Chelsea, to where you could take a zone and then seed it later on, because there's no meaningful strategic value what Chelsea is going to get from it. So you're like, you know what? Everyone's gone in the zone. I don't give a shit. I don't want it. MOAB it on the way out. And basically, Chelsea can deal with the people that she lost taking the zone, and then eventually they'll take it, but they don't get to add to their population. So they're stuck with whatever they went into that zone with. So it's a net loss for them in terms of like, yeah, they might have taken the territory, but can they hold it over a war of attrition of you taking away those resources over time of hours? So that's an interesting like direction that it's going down. And I feel like it is so much better than what it was in Legacy in terms of the how it's all going to come together in the next couple of weeks or so. Okay, so that kind of sums up that. Let me check my notes before we're about to move on to Q&A. Let's see. Yeah, that's everything. Okay, and again, just keep in mind, obviously we're still working on it. There's going to be some bugs, but we're going to move into some of the operator stuff before we move on to Q&A. So let's go to the main menu Alcatraz. I'm not going to save that map because someone's going to crash out on me because I moved a bunch of stuff around. Let's play in, and then let's show, oh, this is a little disclaimer, but we talked about that week previously. So there were a bunch of operator weapons that got slid in the DMs over the course of this week that we didn't really talk about because we didn't want to spam. If I had posted a Steam post on Steam every day, people would have muted my fucking Steam patch announcements. So again, if you want to see what's going on, if you want to understand why we keep updating the game every hour or every 6 hours on the clock, I would highly recommend that you join our Discord. I'm going to show you a screen grab because there's literally a channel where you can see up to the second what's changed. What are we doing? Did we fix that bug you just reported? You know, we'll link to Steam threads. We link to Discord threads. We link to comments people say in the chat. So then that way you can track up to the second to the minute what's going on in the project. Because then you can even see what we're doing during a day. You know, or any course of the day. But the biggest thing is I highly recommend you check this out because then that way when we don't post something on Steam, this is your go-to for knowing like what changed. Because I don't want to spam Steam. We changed too much in a day. So you figure we added the CBRN guard as a mesh that you can basically play it as an operator or as the RTS heroes. So one of those guys got in. We also went ahead and we added about, I think it was 6 new weapons. So all of the remaining operator weapons are now live in the game. We fixed a bug with the proficiency of SMGs and rifles to where there's so many weapons that were added that the amount of rifle proficiency was not high enough for you to unlock all the weapon types. So the AUG got put in, the XM45 got put in, the Striker 45 got put in, and a huge Buffy AK-85 was put in. The Deagle was put in, and the USP was put in. And the Deagle is basically the new meta for fighting the Juggernaut. These things are amazing. They penetrate at least 5 infected when you shoot. So they'll go through a blow-up guy and all the standard infected behind them. Because there is a penetration value in the game. Now, Leon and Michael have done a preliminary balance on all the attachments. Well, the Deagle does have attachments. So you can go in there and kit it out and figure out how you want it to look and do all that fun stuff. There are some preliminary things. I'm playing on the dev build, so I can't actually change this. It looks like he still needs to add a magazine one. So I'll get to him about doing some different magazines for the Deagle. But they are still working on that actively. There's still one more mesh that he needs to add, which is the new tactical guy that you can hire at your staff. We'll add that as another mesh that you can pick. But you can see that the ensemble of meshes are very long. Excuse me. And yeah, so like there's a lot there in terms of things that you can choose now and you can play as from an operator standpoint to the weapons. So try those out. Let us know what you think about the attachments and all the new weapons. There's a lot of new things to play with when it comes to the operators, to the evacuation, to quality of life across the board. Let's see, is there any, oh, right. I need to show that rapid fire. So I'm going to really quickly show this, and then we got to fix that visual bug. So we're going to go to top down. How can I show this quickly? Oh, yeah, I should go here, and then I need to put an operator into the map, and I will show this super duper quickly, and then we're going to move into Q&A. So there's my operator, and then I need to put some trees in the map. So we're going to open up one of these active foliage actors. I want the blueprint. So we're going to go here. And we're just going to drag in some of those. I don't know if anyone here ever played PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. When you used to have that tree foliage thing back in the day, where everyone would turn their tree settings really low so you could see through the grass, and it was really funny. Because you can see in RTS, we hide the shrubbery. So then that way it's like, okay, the RTS player needs to see. They need the readability. But in our operator, it's kind of weird. So what we did is we made it to where the foliage actually has a dynamic material layer that trees by default are back, foliage is back, grass is back. So you actually have to worry about, can I see said target through the foliage and the shrubbery that I'm in? And then if I press B, it transitions back to the RTS view. That's already on experimental as it stands right now, as currently as testing. The other thing you'll notice is that all of the civilian evacuation assets actually have their rooms in now for operators. So you can actually appreciate the meshes and the geo that RTS players can't see unless they sit there and kind of like finagle their camera here based off of their vision range. So if I go over here, you'll notice the same thing for euthanization. I wonder if Dimitri fixed the collision. Otherwise, it's going to be embarrassing. Yeah, he did. But you can see the same thing here, where you can see the roof and kind of what he's building, where he's like filling in the dead bodies over here and all the other fun stuff. So operators can obviously go in here and explore, just kind of look around. RTS players can look in through that door, little like sheet metal, and it just makes it opaque. As it stands right now, we're getting to a point where all of these assets are getting to like their final blockout stage finally, where it's going to be like, we didn't want to make these look too pretty until we had put it through the testing. Because you don't want to go in, put in a bunch of shit, make it look nice, and then realize it's not going to work for all use cases. It's not going to perform in all the cases that we need. So that's why you saw us putting in like a bigger one, a medium-sized one, kind of small one. And like that was the old euthanization, but it didn't fit all the needs. It wasn't technically what we needed. It's kind of a stand-in for the security wing until this asset is finalized and there's some other technical element that Dimitri is rectifying. And then his goal is to put a nice little sexy logistics like security ops center to replace these placeholders. But at least it's distinct enough to where you know what you're building. But the idea is that now that this asset is constructed, it's final, it's gone through its paces, we're happy with its imprint and size, then now it's going through its final paces of getting textured, getting the final models. And then slowly but surely, you'll see this one take priority. It will go through the same process of elimination going into next week from a modeling standpoint. Well, Dimitri to work will go through and just like, finesse it. We'll put it in the first version. We'll test it with you guys. How do you guys like the design? How's the physical imprint? X, Y, and Z. Same thing for this. where we didn't really, this structure will be finalized going into next week or the next week after that, where it's like, okay, we saw a bug, we fixed it in a day, or a couple, technically 2 days, where we wanted to kind of put the base version out, watch how people play, talk to people, and then see like, okay, I can see what you're talking about, or these edge cases are weird, or let's close up this segment. So again, we're very reactive, we're very fluid, or we like to be able to respond very quickly. So you're gonna notice some assets that are untextured. You're gonna notice some assets that are rough. Why are we doing that? That's why. So we don't end up wasting time, and then wasting your time in terms of basically, then we have to go back and retexture, remodel, and do a bunch of shit that ended up having to be thrown out and changed and manipulated and edited anyway. We did add in a mechanic for the LHA6 where if you evacuate people that are infected, they will roll damage events that will pop up on your screen, and it will basically say, engine room damaged. It's basically going to incur 10,000 health damage. The communications array was scuttled or burnt, was on fire. And we set up a system for Dimitri to work on going into the next week where there's a physical explosion and a sound effect associated with it. Currently, it's on his backlog of things that he's going to have to work on after he gets all of this situated and gets the baseline structures and everything finalized and textured and looking nice. And then he's going to move on to this and prototyping the Niagara effect. So you can see like, oh, you're evacuating over here, and yeah, it damaged the helicopter, it damaged your carrier, but you'll see like a small little explosion in the distance, and you'll hear a sound and a shockwave where like this area will be on fire for the next 60 seconds. And then you'll know, oh, I need to get an engineer over there. I need to repair my LHA6, because if your LHA6 is scuttled, all evacuation is offline. You cannot evacuate for the rest of the game. That is on you. You lost your one way. CERC has lost total confidence in you. No one's leaving the island anymore. Kill Chelsea or lose. It's as simple as that. So it's one of those things where like if you lose the carrier, you effectively lose one metric of gameplay and one pressure point for Chelsea, and CERC locks you off from that entire gameplay aspect of like you can't do that anymore. We did turn off the gas consumption for the carrier. That's no longer a thing. We increased the health of the carrier to 20k as a preliminary value. It can't get destroyed now. It is no longer in God mode in your maps, so just be aware of that. I wonder, hold on. Okay, good. You can't delete it anymore, because we were getting trolls in co-op. Or someone would join a session, delete your carrier, and then run away. So that did get blocked. I was just making sure that it was still. Oh wait, no, never mind. It's still a thing. We're gonna have to fix that. You should not be able to delete your carrier. Let me write that down. Is block carrier deletion on server internal check, hard coded. So it will not allow you to delete LHA6, because then that basically you're fucked at that point. You can no longer evacuate. These helicopters don't know where to go anymore. Okay, so that wraps up those segments. Technically, there's one other thing, is that we added a dynamic FOV slider that Michael kind of, oh wait, I'm still on slow-mo, aren't I? Hold on. We added a dynamic slider where it kind of zooms in more gradually. It kind of has like a cool little like zoom in speed, and just kind of like FOV slides it, and did that. So there is that for like a little adjustment that we did for zooming in and out. Like I mentioned in the post on Steam, operator polish is going to be delayed a little bit longer as we work through these line items, and then we're going to, hold on, let me just open it up. And then we're going to go in the Q&A, because we're already at what? 1 hour and 14 minutes. So yeah, we need to move on to Q&A. So the next thing would be, where are you? No, it's not that one. Oh, there it is. I need to pin this. I was so tired last night, I forgot to pin it, but I created it. So this document, this post, acts as our live thread that you're going to see me updating and tweaking based off of talking to people and just generally gauging where we are at a standpoint of what's being worked on now, what came before, and what's coming next. So you can see right now we're in Q2, until like June-ish. And the idea is that we're working to rectify and get all of this in. Obviously, if we finish this sooner, then you'll start to see these elements start at the end of Q2. But we want to make sure that civilian evacuation is not rushed at any means, and that DNA research has some time to incubate, because a lot of the civilian evacuation stuff that's going to be coming in next week for the research is going to be tying in the DNA research drops, like the DNA drops that you can get via the DNA collector that the scientists can build, and that the scientists can run around and play, find Waldo, collecting those DNA samples that act as another currency type for the CERC. But you can see that basically this kind of gives a quick little summary of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and what's going on, and what are our priorities and initiatives going into quarter 2. What are our priorities going into quarter 3? I'm going to briefly just go through this post, and then we're going to move on to Q&A because I've already talked and blabbed for long enough. So quarter 3, just to give a quick drive-by, is the infected AI and naval systems. So it's going to be tuning up and fixing edge cases for the infected AI pathfinding, whether it be CERC or the infected, for any inefficiencies for attacking and defending. It's going to be basically tweaking and adding in Leviathan and cross-island hopping to Chelsea and the infected as a whole. So at that point, we'll be coming to a decision in terms of basically the Leviathan implementation and his fast travel system for building basically holes and tunnel networks across the map. If you turn him off, at that point, we're going to be looking into doing the subways where you can garrison a unit, and then you can ungarrison them in another section, and the infected will be able to use that, and you'll have to defend those subway entrances across the island and the world. That's kind of how we're looking at potentially to kind of like address the issue. We're also looking at potentially having boats that can crash those random events from different infected ports or different launch off points. Those are the 2 different things that we're looking at. I haven't made a decision yet. That's something that we're going to come to a head in the next month or 2. At that point, we're also aiming to have San Francisco North completely replace. So in the current map that you can see, let me quickly just open this so I can give some context to the people that don't know what I'm talking about as I'm talking about this thread. I'll let the game launch on the back end, is that you figure essentially San Francisco North is coming in as basically like we have a beta map and we have the stable map that's on the main menu as it stands right now on Cepheus. We launch the experimental. The beta is the version that's going to eventually replace the stable. Stable is the small treasure island as you know it. Beta is the labyrinth of San Francisco North with Treasure Island, with Angel Island, with Alcatraz. And you can build on all the islands, and that the infected understand how to get around. So beta has a lot of issues. I don't recommend you play in that map unless you just want to play a quick throwaway match on San Francisco North in an untextured area. But you can get the scale and the direction that we're working towards from a programming and from a level design standpoint. Because Efren's been working on the bugs and the pathfinding and the collision stuff that you guys are reporting on Iron Wake, Dead Passage, and the other maps. And a lot of them have been rectified, especially he's been auditing the world buildings for civilian evacuation issues where civilians get stuck. Ideally, that gets wrapped up from all the stuff you guys have reported in the last week, today or going into next week. Well, technically, say Saturday, so early next week. So then that way he can get back to doing the deco and filling in San Francisco North for the environmental assets like the cars and the streets and all the other stuff to fill in the gameplay areas. So we're playing that by ear in terms of whatever you guys find on the current rotation of maps. Technically, he still has to make a standalone version of North San Francisco, and then he needs to make a standalone version of Treasure Island for people that don't want a 6-hour. Because I mean, I was talking to some people, and they were saying that whenever they play on San Francisco North, it's easily upward of like 10 hours sometimes, 8 to 10 hours. Because you figure if you don't perfectly lock down the infection, you're going to have a breakout event. It's going to spiral out to like an entire neighborhood, and then you're going to have a war of attrition with the infected. So there's definitely a vector for like expansive, like really, really like spiraling in terms of what you planned and what actually happens when you fail and one of your goals or whatever on that map. Because that map is crazy in terms of basically its size. But anyway, I digress. So that's something that we're aiming on with these 2 goals. Going into like July-ish is what I would say. June, July, ideally, is what we're going to be working on getting, because our goal is July 28th to get San Francisco North populated and ready for like, you can play it, but still some edge cases. So that's what Efren and Dimitri are working on. Dimitri will be joining him soon on that. Lieutenants are basically Chelsea's operators. So they're basically special units that augment the abilities of units in their territorial domain. So the idea would be is that like over time, Chelsea can build hero units. Those hero units are built towards certain play styles of stealth, buffing, or like basically like a buffing system for them, or brute force. There's 3 different archetypes, which is Mason, the SWAT commander from the book on Steam. There's what's her name? I can't remember her name right now. It's the Federal operative girl, which is basically the kind of the goth girl look one. And then there was Noah Wells, which is basically the doctor. So between those 3, they all take up different archetypes, and the idea would be going into quarter 3 is giving each the standard infected, the blow up, and the spitters offshoot mutations, where it's like the blow up guy for like Noah Wells doesn't do as much damage, but he emits a poisonous gas that would poison your units and infect damage and imply a little bit of infection damage. Or the Federal operative, which is the girl that can cloak as the SMGs, she would effectively allow them to cloak for the spitters. So then that way you'd have to use scout drones or guard towers or other things to be able to decloak them. We're going to call it camouflage by all intents and purposes, and you'll be able to see them when you're closer to them. But the idea is those are things that we want to experiment with going into quarter 3 to give each lieutenant their own mechanisms of play. Like Chelsea, she'll play a certain way. Lieutenants will play a certain way, but also the subordinates under them. So when you're fighting Chelsea, you're going to fight the good old vanilla infected. When you're fighting the Federal operative, they'll have a spin or a take to them. When you're fighting Noah Wells, they'll have a buffing or like a support role kind of like thing to them. And then when you're fighting Mason, which is the SWAT guy, he'll have more of like brute force, kind of like, everything's a hammer or a nail kind of deal, where he's gonna basically be a lot more like gung ho on you, have a more like resilience for his unit. So that's the idea we're going to, and then that ties into the DNA research. So you have to hunt down and kill every lieutenant, get their unique strain, and then get a baseline amount of DNA to unlock shredder rounds, so that way you can kill Chelsea. So that's coming back. And the idea would be is that if you damage Chelsea through a threshold, she goes into a cocoon, and then she heals. And the idea is the more you hurt her and you damage her into that cocoon, the stronger she gets. And the idea would be is that she's going to become a lot more passive unless you intentionally go to her domain. Because I've seen strats where you could go and you can take her out in 20 minutes if you know exactly what you're doing. So there's going to be a lot of more like, I guess you could say, layers of sophistication added to Chelsea, where we focus on the infected AI in quarter 3 to make it to where running to her is a death sentence. And we don't have to over-rely on her being a sponge, like, a damage sponge or like a bullet sponge, over just being deadly from the get-go. Her damage speed, her attack rate, her movement speed, her abilities, and her ability to, call reinforcements up quicker if you're taking too long to kill her. So those are the tangible directions that we're moving in terms of that flow. And then having it to where, again, you damage her to the threshold, she retreats, she hides. Her pod will be protected. Her primary hive pod is protected. She's protected. You could damage her, you could wound them, you could slow them down, but you can't kill them until you get the shredder rounds. And the idea is that she's going to stay passive in that zone. So how she goes right now, where she'll get stuck on these side missions, where she'll wander into your base, or she'll accidentally show up at one of your walls, that's going to be toned down. It's going to be on her lieutenants and her subordinates to go out and do the job. She is the queen. She needs to act like the queen. So she needs to basically be in her primary area of dominance. She needs to protect her hive. And what we had in Legacy, we didn't properly explain this, and I have to kind of figure out how we want to do this in the rebuild, is that we also had a supporting system where the longer it took you to kill her, the larger her area of influence would become. So so you had that growing circle from Chelsea's area, and over time, it would envelop the entire map. So the idea would be is that eventually, over the course of hours, she'd be allowed to go halfway across the map. She'd be able to lead armies. She'd be able to get more involved because she's becoming more confident in her abilities. But we scaled her linearly over time by days of cat versus mouse. You're the cat. Sorry, not my bad. She's the cat, you're the mouse, by all intents and purposes. So you figure you can't kill her in the beginning. There's a power imbalance. So you figure the biggest thing is you have to figure out how you're going to tackle that imbalance, how you're going to quarantine her, how you're going to slow her down and shiver as much as possible to buy yourself time to be able to get the research to put her down by killing her lieutenants, by killing her subordinates, learning more about the virus. It's a time. You know, you're always working against time in the game in terms of basically like the longer you take, the harder it gets, the more entrenched she becomes. So then that way it scales linearly over time of like 5 days, 10 days, 15 days, X, Y, and Z. That's how it was in Legacy, and we're going to be building on those and making adjustments and tweaks as we go and just kind of iron out and just kind of like, you know, be responsive in terms of like how we want these things to kind of like be in the rebuild. Now, mind you, there's always going to be some room of interpretation or like adjustment with custom game options to turn off certain elements or turn on certain elements or make them harder or whatever. So if you have suggestions to make later down the line, as we get into quarter 3, let us know. Maybe you can mention, if you want to really mention it badly right now, you can, but I would wait until we enter quarter 3. So my attention is fully on that. And then we can have a dialogue and a conversation if you guys want some custom game options to relate or change some elements of gameplay to get certain things out. Because I was talking to Phoenix the other day, and he was suggesting, well, why don't you make it to where players can customize the investigation strength? How many can be ran at any given time? Because those are their reaction waves that when you attack them, how hard they can attack you back. And that would allow people to make the game progressively very hard or very easy based off of just what kind of experience they want today. So that kind of sums up that. The operator polish is pretty self-explanatory. It's just making it to where operators can build. Finalizing the internals and about 2 or 3 more categories of operator attachments for weapons. Scope zoom and adjustable zooms based off of the operator weapons. Further tuning the damage fall off and bullet velocity behaviors for the operators. Implementing the legwork that we've already established by having the AI physically drive vehicles is having it where the operators can drive vehicles themselves and they can use the turrets on said vehicles to have crews. So that way you and your friend, one guy can drive the Abrams, the other one's operating the smoothbore. A third one's using the machine gun. So that way you can form teams or crews of people that are like working together. Or we also had this in like a prototype we tested a couple of years ago where you could have it to where if you were playing as an operator, you could press a key or you could focus on driving, and then the AI that was the driver that was in the vehicle would operate the turret, would shoot the minigun. So that's something from our prototype stages that we're going to bring over. So that way, if you don't want to shoot and you just want to be a chauffeur and you just want to drive the Abrams and just let the AI shoot the smoothbore and manage the 3 other guns and you don't want to worry about getting your friends in, you still can. You press a key, it turns on the AI. You press another key, it turns them off, and then players will come in. And obviously, if a player comes in, it'll turn off that functionality so only a player can control it. They leave, it turns it back on. So those are all initiatives and things that we're going to be working on going into like the end part of quarter 3 to just cement the operators and make them not as much gimmicky and kind of bring it home. And then obviously the last parts are like operator general handling of quality of life, of like the sliding and the efficiency and the animation, the quality, putting in client-side predictions for people that are playing with Europe to America can have, they don't have to wait on the server to say you're aiming. They don't have to wait on the server to say you're reloading. So you get that instant gratification of you hit reload, you don't have to wait for the ping to come back and say you're reloading. The server will just catch up. And it'll be like, oh, you started to reload 0.4 seconds ago. But because you're playing from America to Europe, and because of the ping and the packet loss, you might not get the call to visually play the reload animation for up to half a second, which feels dirty. It feels wrong, which is why when I actually added client-side prediction for aiming, which is why if you're playing as an operator and you're playing with a high ping, you aim instantly now, instead of having to wait half a second for your zoom to come up and your camera to zoom in. I fixed that technically a week ago in a shadow patch as a test. But you figure we need to go further down that line for shooting and reloading. Anyway, then obviously the next element is just the LCAC, the LHA6, and making it to where you can build from it, you can dock it, and you can use it to basically offload and load supplies in terms of like bringing Abrams on the LHA6, and then bring it to a dock in a different part of the map, and then unload that Abrams by using the loading elevators to bring people on and off like a Legacy. So if you guys want a use case of what I'm talking about for the LCAC and the LHA6, opt into Legacy on Steam, go play with the LHA6. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about and what our vision is. It's just improving it, and it's making it a little more easier to understand with the UX. LHA6 was the amphibious vehicle. Again, that is a Legacy if you guys want to go try that out. It has been ported into the rebuild, but it just allowed you to build amphibious hovercraft that you could have on the back of the LHA6. And then you were able to basically garrison units and transfer them from the elevators. And then that way you could bounce them out of the back of the LHA6 and then launch beach invasions with your LHA6s, LCAC, sorry, on the beaches. That's why there's so many beaches on San Francisco and Angel Island and Treasure Island. Those are basically setting the stage for them to come back in the next couple months. Restoring the weapons, again, Legacy, where basically you can build the weapons, anti-bird, anti-juggernaut, anti-big, for things that try and get on your deck. And then the world events will cement basically the end of the year and factions and simulation life. So the idea is basically just adding in a layer of simulation. Technically, this would be the best point to put in strategic resources. I'm not going to put that down on a line item yet. It's something that we're going to come back to later down the line. It's something that's still kind of a wish list for me. But basically, it's just random events that can occur over their 20 to 40 second mini missions of like evacuate those civilians. A pack of dogs, just feral dogs might show up. Random raiders might attack you when you're walking down a street. Basically, levels of simulation that make the world feel more alive. Like when you're playing a Far Cry game or Division or another game where you just see random things going on that aren't of consequence to you. You didn't do anything to make it start. It's just a simulation layer. And then the final layer of quarter 4 is police. Natalie. So the police faction, the anarchist faction, and 1 to 2 dynamic civilian groups. We're taking the avenue of quality over quantity. Y'all have seen the last 4 years of early access of pushing quantity over quality. That was the whole point of the rebuild, is to basically take more time on the doctrines, take more time on the pathfinding, the civilian evacuation, learn from the mistakes we made in the past, and fucking fix it. Now, I'm not saying we're not going to make new mistakes. That'd be stupid to say that. Everyone's going to make mistakes, whether it be from a design standpoint to just generally playing the game. But what I am saying is that we did too much in Legacy in terms of basically there were 12 to 6 groups, and it was like a fucking clown show in terms of the amount of chaos that was going on at any given time. And like they were always in your way. They didn't really add anything meaningful to the gameplay loop. So our goal is, with factions toward the end of the year, is making it to where you have the police and the anarchists. Those are your major sub-factions. And then you have the 2 civilian groups that are going to be subservient or basically sometimes against the police and the anarchist faction. And the idea is those 2 dynamic civilian groups are going to kind of be like they show up every once in a while. So you might not get them all the time. If one gets killed, another one might roll later down the line based off of what's going on in the world. What's the state of events? So the idea is that those are like your reusable tokens in terms of like simulating, oh, the world's going in this direction, the police are winning out, the anarchists are losing because they're being hunted down by the police faction. So let's spawn in some little bit of spice here. Let's put in like a raider group that might ally with the anarchists and dick you and dick the police because they don't like anyone. You know, or let's spawn in a group that might align with the police faction and be a vassal of them, and the police faction will end up trying to protect them. Because realistically, it's going to be a trickle-down effect. We'll start on the police faction. We'll do them first, because that's what everyone fucking wants, is the police faction at this point, is basically having it to where you can hire their units, their vehicles, based off of having a good reputation with them. Kind of like in Legacy, where you were able to enter into negotiations or supply and basically choose who you want to win. You know, give them resources, and then that would basically allow you to steer their development in terms of like they would become more reliant, and they'd be able to protect you, and they'd be able to expand a little bit here and there in Legacy. So taking that idea and building it out over a quarter of like, okay, because I know I've heard about this, I've talked about this for years with some people, people liked the idea of dynamic civilian groups in Legacy, which is what we called it before instead of factions, but you couldn't really do that much with them. They were just kind of there. They kind of just were with you, but they kind of just for just doing their own thing. So going around with this next thing is kind of going down the lines of being able to give them like orders, where it's like defend here, attack here, that kind of stuff. That's the direction I want to go into. So going into quarter four, my goal is to focus only on the police faction, use them as the incubator, get everything functional, get it to where you can recruit them, get it to where you can basically enter good, positive, negotiation with them, whatever, and be able to like good reputation, bad reputation. They fight you X, Y, and Z, and then get to a point where you can issue them the orders. That way, we can get the entire flow and the entire process, get their vehicles in, get their infantry in, and then once we have that perfected, then and only then will we move on to the other elements of basically the anarchists and the other two groups that we roll. So I think that's the most best way of rolling this out and getting it to a point for this year of just building on all the things people have said negatively about the game, building on all the things that positively that they're excited about, whatever, and fixing the bugs and the other edge cases here and there. So that's the game plan as it stands going into 2026. And like I've said in the past, if the only thing that's remaining towards the end of the year is just the campaign for like the baseline game of like working on like say the story, that's okay. I can take 2027, take my sweet ass time, and actually design something that's of value instead of a 1 to 2 hour piece of shit. So that's the biggest thing for me is getting to a point of like stability at the end of the year. Everyone's happy. Get those major systems in from the rebuild and basically go further than the rebuild by the end of the year, which I would make the argument we've already further than the rebuild right now. And there are obviously some edge cases here and there we need to rectify and fix, but there's a lot more value, a lot more replayability in the game as it stands right now than ever before. Are there bugs? Absolutely. But we're going to fix them. Just report them, let us know what's going on, and we'll work with y'all to fix them. One thing
I forgot to mention one thing, one nerf that I got urged to do about the engineer's ability about his turrets. The MK19 and the sentry turret got a nerf.
What about it? Oh, the balance. Oh, right. He wants to know about those, right? Because that was the meta, is that people were building 10 MK19s and then they lure Chelsea into them. And she get deleted in 5 seconds effortlessly. That got nerfed to the ground for basically their cost and their damage to Chelsea because you figured that was just crazy. So, again, he did go through and balance some of those deployable pet turrets for the engineer because that was literally disgusting in terms of basically how broken it was. I think that pretty much wraps it up from a standpoint of just generally what we're doing, what's going on, what are the initiatives. And from there, we're going to move into Q&A. Well, let me go ahead and bring up my sheet. And what do we got for questions? If you asked the question previously in YouTube or in Discord, please copy your question down, and I will do my best to answer it. Let me bring you up to talk, John. I'm just going to start a timer on my phone. Let me just do that real fast because I don't want to bleed this out too long. You're going to go to bed?
No, I'm looking for the question that got sent.
Okay, I'll do 20. I'll do 15 minutes for questions, and then we're gonna wrap it up there. Okay, so first question is John Carmine. Let me invite you to speaketh. Okay, you have the floor.
Yeah, hi. So I have both a question and also an idea.
Sure.
So when it comes to question is, when it comes to operators and their weaponry, will they always have to be like leveled to use a specific weapon, or can they just immediately from the get-go like use any gun that they basically want?
So we're going in the direction of category XP, where the idea is that like you gain proficiency in some type of weapon, and then as you do that, you unlock weapons down that category. So using any SMG unlocks SMGs. It doesn't matter which one. And then using a specific weapon unlocks the attachments for that weapon. So that's how it works as it stands right now. And what was your other question?
Basically an idea for like a future thing when it comes to operators. Maybe an idea to have like, cause with like some of the already named operators, you could like pick a costume for them.
Yes.
How about like for like normal like the CERC like rifleman or heavy, like different color variations or something.
So that is something that's on our wish list. Um, I don't want to do anything for that just yet until later down the line, because you figure,
Understandable.
um, yeah, because I know there's more decos, more wall types, and more skin types people wanted for the assault. Like just having a CBRN only skin for the assault, I know is something people wanted. They wanted like alternate takes on all the CERC, but they're just in CBRN gear the whole time. Let me come back to you on that one because I know that's on Michael's wish list. But his backlog right now is animations, finishing the weapons, and then working with Hawkins to finish up the balancing. So after all that's situated over the next month or two, that's something that he could explore to figure out like, okay, great, like things have calmed down. Let me make some alternate takes that you can just go on a drop down like in Company of Heroes and mark active when you buy a unit or whatever. So yeah, I do agree with you with that, and that's something we need to look down later down the line for. Was that all your questions?
Yes, they were all my questions.
Groovy. All right, so questions. We got Hawkins?
Polly had 3 questions. First, can we get a purge/condemn brush or hotkey so we don't have to click each building individually?
Wait, say that one more time, sorry?
Can we get a purge/condemn brush or hotkey so we don't have to click each building individually?
Yes, I'm working on that. Yeah, I'm working on that. Let me, that's on my wish list for like things I need to get in. I just a little bit backlogged on that right now, but that's a quality of life that I am working on. So it's something that we're going to try and get in next week.
Second question, you can sit on the LHAC and purge the entire map with no repercussions. Would there be requirements to purge like having units in the area?
Where's that question?
Just click on my latest message. Where I said Operator Mania.
Hold on.
Opamania.
Uh,
I have linked
hold on, let me click on
message
that. I'm trying to read it. Wait, where'd you put it?
in the podcast chat.
Yeah, I don't see it. Oh, there it is. Okay. You can still the LCAC for the entire. So as it stands right now, if you purge the entire map, you won't be able to evacuate from the map anymore. So purging causes a external ripple effect that can permeate up to 3 zones that are adjacent. So you start purging in A, B, C, and D will start to feel that ripple effect. So it's basically, as you kill more, it's going to get more aggressively, the curve, to where, let's say you do what you're suggesting, and there's not enough facilities on the LHA6 to be able to build a base. So you're going to do that. Now, every time you land on the mainland and you build a base, they're going to bog you down for everywhere where there are people, technically. So like you figure, but I kind of see your point, is you could just hide there, kill everyone. And if there's no one left, there's no one to kill you anymore.
Exactly. And that's the also cheese method. I have an idea already.
Hit me with
but
it.
that's basically make it a lose condition if you kill too many civilians.
Let me think.
Because then
Well, that's the
technically
thing,
the
though.
government lose.
That's the thing, though, is like you figure that's the biggest thing that I'm conscious of about doing. Because once you start to do lose conditions tied to a certain type of play style, then you're forcing that play style. So people that want to play Umbrella and just have fun one day can't. So it's a very slippery slope in terms of basically enforcing that restriction or loss condition, win condition. Let me think about that, because that's a good point.
Yeah.
I'm going to write that down on my whiteboard.
Because-
And I'm going to come back to that as a brainstorm thing, because you figure I have some ideas. You could make it to where purging has an efficiency output where it's like, the more you're purging globally, you simulate like how long it takes for them to physically do it instead of just doing a local churn. So it would take into account on the zone manager, not only is you know, these 3 zones doing it, but those zones are doing it, and those zones are doing it, and it's a mass quantity of them. So condemning wouldn't be affected by this, but purging could. Well, you can make it to where if you're doing mass purges, it lowers the rate, per se, because it has to move people around, simulated to shoot all the people or whatever. So there are different ways of doing that. But technically, I guess that's the biggest thing, because I would have to figure out if it's going to really hurt Chelsea that much, because she's killing and infecting faster than you're purging regardless. But I guess it also depends if you start that from day 0, what's the trade there? I got to do some scenarios on that. Let me do some play tests. I'm going to put that brush in that you all asked for, and then I'm intentionally just going to purge the entirety of Half Moon Bay, and then let me run a sim, and I'll come back to you on that one. So ideally, ask that question next Saturday, and I will have an answer for you, or a conclusion. So let me write that down real fast, and I'll move on to your other question. So mass purge exploit. Okay, so I'll look into that. That's something that I will, hopefully I'll see you next Saturday, and then we can reconvene on that, and we can try it out and see how my solution works out, because I have some ideas. And then his third question is, any plan to let infantry merge in the squads that also share? You could have more than 80-ish soldiers dealing with the apocalypse. You mean like Company of Heroes, where you have multiple people in one squad?
Either that or it's like in Men of War.
No, that's not a design goal. The whole point is the individual on Cepheus. So that's not planned. Okay.
And there's a question on YouTube.
Okay, let's see what we got here. Can you add an option where you can start with one of your custom-made operators from the start of the game instead of Winters? Let me think. So like you choose or designate a favorite, and then the host gets their favorite instead of Winters. Let me write that down, and if it's not too bad, we can try and squeeze it in, because that is a good idea. So mark favorite operator to replace maps with Winters. That's a simple operation. Let me get back to you on that one. That's a good idea. I'm gonna run that up the chain with the programmer, and then we'll see what we can do about that for next week. What else do we have for questions? Because we have, how long do we have on the clock? 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. So one guy asked about checkpoints for buses, like real life bus stops and bus stations would only be allowed to be built in designated locations, literally on the side of the civilian bus. That is something that is like an auxiliary goal for us. Going before we wrap up civilian evacuation is to do something like that. Unit B5. So that is something that is on our list. It's like an extra item that we want to put down where you can place those in zones, and then wall buildings and evacuations would always drop up there first instead of going to the intake or a wall building itself. Let's see, what else did we got here? Any other questions on Discord?
I'll ask if we can get new Onslaught skins.
I will ask Michael about that one. I'll text him after this podcast and see if he can fit anything in, but I don't know about that right now. We haven't really talked about that too much because he's been really backlogged for just getting the current animation stuff and the operator stuff situated. Let's see. Let's see what we have for questions. That's a cool picture. I'm going to show that on the stream real fast. Hold on. So here's one of the pictures that someone, I guess, did for the game. Let me bring that up. That's really cool. I like that. It's like an infected SWAT guy, and they're all like gathering behind a base they're attacking. I do like that. That's cool. I need your save files, Rudy, when I start making trailers. Just saying. because I have to start making trailers soon after everything's presentable and situated in the next like couple weeks. So I'm definitely going to be DMing you for your save files, so I can use those as quick starts for just capturing really quick battles per se. Um, and Silent Song, whoever wants to help me, because the more chaotic save files you guys give me, the better for like really sexy bases, so I can record montages and mashups, just showing the game.
If only I had Fort Knox still.
Oh yeah, no, that got deleted a long time ago, and a long time too long ago. You spent like
Yeah.
an hour building a mega base while everyone else was playing Horde in the other corner of the map. Let's see. Okay, so,
Decoration buildings.
yeah, decoration buildings.
More decorations, I guess.
Not for right now. We'll come back to that after the current. I would say after San Francisco North is done. Technically, there's nothing else on the agenda besides campaign stuff for pre-planning, and I still have to get with the team for that. So I would say the best time for us, from a design standpoint, to put in new building types would be after San Francisco North is done, and just ratchet up some more variations and some more decos here and there. So it's something we can look into long term after that. So that'd be around like Q3. So let's come back to that another quarter or so, and we can basically look at that for you guys and see about decos and other small different wall types like cargo containers and the division type walls, because those are all things that we want to do and have Dimitri just kind of go crazy on. So here, let me check my cheat. 2 minutes. So we're getting another 2 minutes, and we're gonna wrap up for questions. Unless it's dead.
YouTube seems dry.
Huh?
YouTube is dry, and as well as Discord.
Inevitably. Well, I guess we'll just wrap it there then, I get that point. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for coming to this week's podcast. As I mentioned before, this build will be live on Steam in the next 15 minutes. So keep an eye on that. It will have everything I showed in terms of this podcast, so you can play it. Let us know what you think. Leon really needs to know about what you think about the balance, the damage fallbacks, the explosions. Everything's been tweaked when it comes to that. He rebalanced all the landscapables. Go in there and start clearing stuff. See if the prices feel more reasonable based off of the juggling effect if you do civilian evacuation. Try out the new civilian evacuation on the multitude of new maps. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you think about the civilian reputation and the militia systems in terms of their cost, in terms of basically like them attacking you and the cost, and the drain, and overpopulation and all of that. The more information we get from you guys, the better, so we can make quick, meaningful, balanced decisions, and we can get everything out to a public as soon as possible over the next week or so. There's going to be bugs. There are going to be dragons. Let us know. What else is there? And again, if you want to support development, check out our Steam support packs for camos on Steam. Check out our Patreon, our Discord, or Steam. Everything helps. Or just Discord and Patreon, sorry, for support. And basically, anything helps for a self-funded team. We work day jobs. This is our passion project. We do our day job, then we come home, we work on this project by all intents and purposes. And it's one of those things where it's getting there, and I can't wait to see where we are going into the end of this month, going into next, because civilian evacuation will be done. And we'll finally be able to start the AI polish that I've wanted to do for a while, and get Chelsea and Lieutenants and Leviathans to a point where they can really bring the pain in terms of basically like the difficulty curve there. And of course, you'll be able to customize it too.